Hello and welcome to our ISTE 20 live booth. So today we're going to be focusing mainly on Google Chrome devices and why we choose to use them and why they're a really good match with Arreya, especially in the sort of education vertical, and why they're really easy to get into. And then some of the other positives about the devices and some of the devices that we've chosen to be really effective and just really reliable, just good devices overall. So we'll touch on a couple of those devices, some key points about why we choose Chrome devices, and then how they work well for schools. So before we get into talking about the actual Chrome devices, we're going to cover real quickly just what is Arreya. So Arreya is a cloud-based digital signage service. So what that means is the editing, the content delivery, and all the content creation is done completely in the cloud, just via a modern web browser, and then obviously an internet connection. So that means anybody, anywhere, whether they're in the office or whether they're at home working, especially in the current situation with sort of hybrid working and hybrid school environments, it's really important that both teachers and administrators can update the signage remotely wherever they're at. So you have the ability to create your content and also distribute it from anywhere with, once again, an internet connection and a browser. A lot of it can also be done on mobile devices too. So whether you have an Android or an iPhone device or some sort of iOS device, a lot of the editing can also be done on mobile devices too. The other part of that is, since it is cloud-based and it is mobile device friendly, you also have the ability to view the content on mobile devices as well. So you can also send out just your customized channel URL. So each Arreya channel gets a customized URL for your channel, and you can send that out just via email or maybe social media, so people can view that content, once again, with just any modern web browser. And the other thing you can do with it as well is Arreya also supports what's called PWAs, so progressive web apps. What that allows you to do is install your Arreya channel as if it were a native application on that device, whether it's Android or Safari or an iOS device, or pretty much any platform with a modern browser supports that PWA. The other cool part about it, and one of the things you can do with Chrome devices, is not only install the Arreya kiosk app to auto launch the signage, but you can also force install the PWAs. So whenever maybe a student Chromebook, you can pin the application to the taskbar. So just by clicking a single icon on the taskbar, they can get to your Arreya channel and stay up to date with upcoming events or maybe live streams or announcements or whatever you choose to put on your screens. The other thing you can also do is you can also install PWAs by device policy. So if you have a device policy for Android or, once again, iOS with Google device policy, you can actually force install a PWA, so they're always going to have it on their home screen and they have a link to it and they can view the most up-to-date content. The other really cool thing about PWAs that you can do is you can do push notifications. So that means maybe whenever you update your content or you want to send out a message that says, check in for the updated events list, or check in at 8:30 for the live stream, you can send out push notifications that will then alert the user that there is an update to the signage, that there's something they need to look at with the app. Some other things about Arreya, we do have a lot of cool integrations. So we do have Google integrations. So we do work closely with Chrome. We are also a Google partner too. We have a lot of cool integrations with Google where you can bring in Google Sheets and Google Slides and Google Forms. And there's a lot of other integrations too that aren't Google specific. Social media, even like RSS, news feeds, live streams from different sources too. A couple other key parts or key points about Arreya: we are license free, so there's no commitment. You can go month to month. We also have a 30-day fully functional trial, so you can test drive the software with no commitment. Instantaneous updates, since it is all cloud-based and it's all browser-based. As soon as you go in and hit push live and actually make a change to your content, it's instantaneously pushed to all of your devices, and also your mobile users will get that update very quickly. We also give the ability to look at analytics too. So whether you're on a mobile device or it's a physical screen with a touch screen or something like that, you have the ability to see what people are looking at, where people are spending the most amount of time. We also have the ability to schedule your presentations too. So an Arreya channel is sort of like a TV channel in the sense where you have a TV show, which in Arreya we would call a presentation. And then you have a schedule, so you can set up a schedule throughout the day where it'll cycle through and change the presentation. So maybe from 8 a.m. to 8:15, you have your morning announcements, and then after that, you switch back to normal content, which shows, upcoming events or things going on, and then maybe around noon, you switch everything out to like a cafeteria menu. You can do all that. You can set up complex recurring schedules right in the Arreya Manager. So now we're going to be talking about Chrome OS. And the very first point is we want to differentiate it from the Chrome browser. So obviously Google makes the Chrome browser. It's also sort of an open source project with the Chromium project, which once again keeps it up to date. And it's a mix between open source, and then they have the sort of enterprise version of it, which is Chrome Enterprise, which we'll cover here in a minute. But it is different than the Chrome browser. It's a little bit of an evolution from the Chrome browser. And it's based off of a Linux operating system, but basically that's where the similarity ends. It has a lot more security features than just a basic Linux distribution, and we'll talk about some of that here in a little bit. The other really big thing about Chrome devices that we really like are just that enterprise grade form factor. And there's a lot of different form factors of the devices too. So this isn't something that's just a system on chip or like a Tinkerboard. It's a full-blown enterprise grade hardware solution. And there's a bunch of different form factors. You see a couple on the screen here. There's an AOpen Chromebox Mini, which is sort of an entry-level but ruggedized device. So it's still a pretty capable device. But it's also ruggedized too, and it's pretty small form factor too. So it's something that you can put on the back of the, just mount directly to the back of the monitor or on the wall. And the overall dimensions are only something like 6 inches by 4 inches by less than an inch thick. So it's a pretty small device, and it's still very powerful for what it is. There's a couple other Chromebox variants too, and then also all-in-ones, which are called Chrome bases. And we'll once again touch on one of those examples here in a little bit. But one of the key things about Chrome OS and Chrome devices is, once again, it's got that enterprise, it's production ready. It's not a Tinkerboard. It's not something you have to, design a case for. It's not something that's sort of fly by night. It's a enterprise grade solution that you can mount and you can leave it, and it's going to last for a long time. Some other really cool parts, Chrome devices, one of the big one is remote management, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. One of the sort of comparisons between other possible hardware solutions is that remote management interface. Some other parts, you have the ability to lock it down into a single app kiosk mode. So we'll talk about that once again in comparison to some other platforms. But you have the ability to select a single app, and it's only going to go to that application after a reboot, and it's hard to get out of it and sort of tamper with it. It's a very secure way to do signage. The last part is it's really easy to get started. So with the admin console, you can set it up, you can pair it to your domain. There's other ways to do a trial and set up sort of a standalone admin console. So you don't have to necessarily have a large infrastructure. You can sort of have a standalone admin console and manage just a couple devices. Or for clients that already have a lot of Chrome devices, it's very popular in education. You can use your existing licenses, or if you have like a extra licenses sitting around or a site license, you have the ability to enroll these devices in that same admin console. So now we're going to talk about why would we choose Chrome devices, especially for signage. So the very first one, a big one that's obviously a constant threat is, security on the devices. So yes, Chromium is an open source based operating system, but there's also the enterprise side of it too, which includes things like a trusted platform module chip on the device, which also ties into verified boot. And what that is a way to verify that only code that is developed, by Google, only trusted code is going to be able to run on that device. Otherwise, it's going to completely wipe that, what's called the stateful partition, and it's going to completely wipe that, and there's going to be no user data that's accessible if there is a detection that, some tampering has been done with low-level, operating system. The other big part about security is rolling updates, and one of the things that we see with other platforms is that out-of-date software is typically one of the biggest security holes that you'll find in 99% of devices out there. So whether that's SSL updates, different cryptology updates, and different 0 days that have been discovered and then patched later. A lot of the time, those updates will not find their way into older versions of software. So keeping that device up to date is obviously one of the most important things, especially with a digital signage device where you go and you install it and you don't expect to really physically go and mess with the device very often. At least that's the idea. You want something that you can sort of set it and forget it. And that's one of the reasons we've chosen Chrome devices is rolling updates. Out of the box, they are set to automatically update and automatically download and install the most recent version of Chrome OS. Now, you do have the ability to set that up where you choose, when you do those updates, but it's one of those things where out of the box it's set up so it's always going to be up to date and it's always going to have the most recent version of any security vulnerabilities that have been patched. So once again, one of the reasons we choose that is just because we want a set and forget device that updates automatically. Another great part about Chrome OS is the single app kiosk mode, and that's especially useful in digital signage. So this is going to be something that could be installed in public, whether it's at a school, whether it's in the hallway, or also in other verticals too, whether it's retail or an office environment. You don't want somebody to be able to go in and swipe down from the top and get out of the browser and get into any other applications. You want it to be locked into just your app. So Chrome out of the box gives us a single app kiosk mode. So you have the ability to set the Arreya app, the Arreya client application, as the only application that's going to be able to be ran on that device. And then after a reboot, it comes right back to the Arreya application. And the only way to get out of that is if you have physical access to the device to reboot it, and then if you have a physical keyboard hooked up to it and know the key commands to get out of there. So it's something that you can put inside an enclosure, and the only way to be able to modify that is going to be either remotely or physically going in and removing that device. And another big part of that I just talked about a little bit ago, but one of the biggest reasons we've chosen Chrome devices as one of our primary deployment methods is the ability to remotely manage them. And the cool part about it is these devices can be managed from anywhere. So if it's something where you have a district office in a central location and maybe you have, 20, 30 different schools with 20, to 50 different Chrome devices at every single location, you have the ability to remotely manage that right from your office at the, district office. Or even something where, you don't even want to walk down the hallway to check on a device. You can do it right from your office. So with the Chrome Enterprise product, you get access to the Google Admin Console, and there you can not only screenshot, you can remote into the device and see what's happening. If somebody calls you and says the screen is displaying blank, you can go in and you can remote into that device and see what the content or what the device is actually outputting to see if the content is playing. You can also reboot it, but another big thing about it is you have the ability to remotely configure device policies. So whether that is if you have a new wireless network getting set up and you want to pre-program in that information. So as soon as you swap that over, the devices automatically connect. Or you want to set a reboot interval, so you want it to reboot once a day, or you want to change around how often it updates and just coordinate all the updates at night. You have the ability to do that all remotely, and you can set up organizations with different sort of folders or hierarchy of how the devices are configured too. The other part about Chrome devices that we really like, and once again, I touched on this a little bit before, but Chrome devices are made to last. So new platforms, they guarantee auto updates for 6.5 years, which is quite a bit more than a lot of other platforms. And a lot of other platforms too don't even give you that much of a guarantee that they'll continue to release updates for that long. And the other part about it is they have different form factors for ruggedized environments. So something where you're going to have a fanless device that's mounted to a wall. They make devices that are made to last. The last one is the ability to sort of white glove these devices. And I'm going to explain this a little bit from the point of view of maybe an IT admin. So if you have once again, a district office and you want to set up, 15 Chrome devices and then mail them out to every school without having to physically go there, one of the great things about Chrome devices is you can really, once you enroll it into the admin console, it is permanently stuck there. So you have the ability to deploy policies remotely. You have the ability to set these up ahead of time. and you can be confident in sending them out to the school and just having somebody plug them in, and then you can go in and change anything up later. So the really cool part about it is you have the ability to remotely set them up and white glove them. One of the things we also do for clients is white glove these devices and pair it to their Arreya channel and set it up completely for them too. So they can get a device that's truly plug and play. It's something that you give power to it and an internet connection, and it connects to a monitor, whether it's a touchscreen or a non-touchscreen, and it plays the content as soon as they plug it in. You can pre-program in all of your wireless networks, any security stuff, whether you have to load certificates or proxy information. You can do that all before you ship the device to the client, and you don't have to walk them through 100 steps of setting up the device. So now let's compare Chrome OS to other devices. So one of the big things is we have Chrome devices are definitely not the cheapest thing out there. You can go out and you can buy a Raspberry Pi, you can grab an Android media player for 30 or 40 bucks. But in the end, is it really that much cheaper when you have to come up with a ton of extras on top of the actual hardware? So the first one I want to talk about that comes up a lot is the Raspberry Pi. So it is a great device for what it is, and it's a tinker board. It's a device to prototype a product and then eventually come out with a production product later. It is not a production device. And on top of that, a Raspberry Pi, when you buy it, comes completely free of any software. So you still have to come up with an operating system. You have to come up with some sort of way to play your digital signage, a way to lock it down, and a way to remotely manage it. None of that is included out of the box with something like a Raspberry Pi. And the other part about that is the case. The form factor of these devices. When you buy a Raspberry Pi, is a completely blank board. There's no heat sinks, there's no fans. It is your responsibility to come up with a case and a way to actually make this device ruggedized. So in the end, between the actual physical, getting the hardware to a point where you can actually deploy it, and then on top of that, the software, finding all those software options, setting them up and configuring them, that versus a Chrome device we found in the past just to be cheaper in the long run to do a Chrome device that already has Chrome OS and already has the remote management. We can receive a device, open the box, and it's something that we can have set up and shipped back out in 10 minutes. Versus something like a Raspberry Pi, there's a lot more overhead and other platforms too. So for what it is, the Raspberry Pi is a great piece of hardware, but really for this sort of thing, it's not a great option. And to sort of expand on that a little bit more is something like Android. So Android devices, you can find them everywhere, super cheap. The problem with Android is a lot of times the cheaper device you find, the older version of Android it's going to be running on. There's still devices sold on Amazon, eBay, tons of different sources that are still running extremely ancient versions of Android like 4.2. And there's major security issues with those old versions of Android. Some to the point where a lot of times when you try to connect it to newer networks, a lot of IT admins won't even let something like that connect to their network because it uses old versions of encryption or SSL or TLS, where it's not even going to be something that you can deploy. The other part about Android, when you get a device like that, is you still have to figure out, so you have Android, which is loaded with the Android operating system, which we'll talk about here in a second a little bit more, but it's still missing a couple extra pieces. So yes, Arreya does have an Android app. It is something that you can do and you can install on the devices, but we typically recommend you use an Android device that has obviously a more recent version of Android, so you don't run into a lot of those issues. And the other part about it is you still have to figure out remote management. So you can definitely set up an Android device, but if something ever goes wrong, you're going to have to physically go there and actually touch the device and figure out what's going on. There are extra software solutions to do remote management with Android, but it's one of those things where it's not built in and it's usually not as streamlined. So there is Android hardware out there that works, but for the most part, it's once again something that's really not the best option. And by the time you get a good device and good software, you're right up about the same cost as an entry-level Chrome device. And the last thing about Android that typically causes a lot of problems, especially with the lower-end Android devices, is Android is an open source operating system. So that means that any manufacturer, any OEM has the ability to build their own version of Android specifically for their device. And what this leads to a lot of times is, missing drivers or missing video codecs or even major kernel problems where the Android device might completely stop working after a certain day and time, or something where videos will not play back because the required codecs were not built into that version of Android. And a lot of times it's something where you can't go in and update it. It may have an old version of Android WebView that you can't update because they don't have a GUI set up on those devices where you can go in and update that kind of stuff. A lot of builds of Android on these devices that are built from open source also don't work with the Google Play Store, so it's a lot harder to install an application. You have to manually sideload the application, and you run into a lot of issues, and the entire time you're opening up security holes. Now, Arreya does work on some of these platforms, other platforms too, like Windows, Mac, and some other, Linux. Anything with a browser, you do have the ability to point to Arreya. But there are some other considerations if you're going for a full deployment. Once again, namely, we've talked about remote updates or, remote management, something that stays up to date. Something that has a kiosk mode too. And that's one of the things that's overlooked on a lot of different Windows devices is they don't have a true kiosk mode. So you can lock it down where it launches one application as the shell, but if it ever crashes, it's not going to automatically reboot. And it's something that you have to go in and, once again, add other software to remotely manage it. So you need TeamViewer, or you need to set up remote desktop so you can go in and remotely reboot it, versus something like Chrome where it just works out of the box. So I'm going to talk about a couple devices that we found extremely useful, especially in the education environment. And we're going to start out with one of our partners, which is AOpen. And the AOpen Chromebox Commercial Mini, which I'll talk about in a second, is one of the lowest cost devices, but it's still extremely powerful. But they're also ruggedized too. So there's a couple images on the screen of the Chromebox Commercial on top and then the Chromebox Commercial Mini on the bottom. And what you'll see is a hardened aluminum case. There's no plastic on it anywhere. So this is something that's extremely rugged. Like, you could drop this thing and it's probably still going to work. This is something you could mount in an enclosure, and it's going to continuously work because it is fanless also. So you don't have to worry about the fans, getting filled with dust and stop working over time. The other thing is, a lot of these commercial devices, like the AOpen Chromebox Commercial, have GPIO ports too, and also remote mount power switch hookups too. So it's something you can put in an enclosure and then run a remote power switch, or you can also hook it up to other hardware integrations too with GPIO ports. And all of these devices also have both wireless and wired options. So that's something where if it's hard to run a wired connection to it, or if you prefer a wired connection, these devices do support both of those. The other really cool part about AOpen devices is they're extremely easy to mount. That's something that the designers kept in mind from the very beginning. You'll see different mounting patterns, then also brackets, so you can mount them in a ton of different ways. And the difference between the Chromebox Commercial and the Chromebox Mini, one, processing power. The Chromebox Commercial also has 2 4K video outputs. So you have the ability to do multiple monitors too, just from the one Chromebox. The Chromebox Commercial Mini is really good for just an entry-level device where you're powering a non-interactive screen, or maybe just a simple interactive monitor. And it's really easy to mount, and once again, it's pretty low cost. And then one of the other really cool form factors of Chrome devices that we really like are what's called a Chrome base. This, for example, is once again AOpen. There are other manufacturers out there, but the AOpen Chrome base Mini is super cool because it is a all-in-one 10-inch ruggedized, once again, touchscreen, and it's sort of a form factor of a tablet. But it's not a tablet. It is a rugged computer that's made to be mounted somewhere, and it's made to be abused, and it's going to hold up to it and handle it. So it is a 10-inch touchscreen, and we have some clients that are using it as like a retail end cap, or in this case of schools, this could be something where it's just a small, Chrome base that's mounted somewhere with more information. Maybe it's in the front lobby, or maybe it's somewhere throughout the school. There's upcoming news, fill out a form, for example, too. You could put a full screen Google form on it and have somebody fill out a form and collect information that way instead of dealing with paper. And once again, the same points with some of the other commercial devices that we talked about earlier also apply to the Chrome bases. It's ruggedized and it's fanless, so it's made to mount somewhere and it's going to last. It works both wirelessly and wired, and it's super easy to mount. Now, AOpen also does make a C-Tile, which is a little bit bigger version of the Chrome base, and they have it in 15, 19, and 22-inch options. So you can also do like a replacement bulletin board where you have a touch screen with your information, your forms, things we just talked about, and you have the ability to mount it and then have your users be able to touch the screen and get the information that way. So I appreciate your time. We just did a little bit of a quick overview of Chrome devices. If you have any other questions about Chrome devices, we're more than happy to talk to anybody about them. Arreya works really good with Chrome. It's one of the reasons we've chosen Chrome is just because of how easy it is to get going too. So there's a lot more information about Chrome devices on our website too, www.arreya.com. So if you have any questions, you can also give us a call. The phone number's on the screen, or visit our virtual booth information section. You can get some more information about how to contact us. Once again, if you have any other questions, definitely feel free to leave them in the chat. I'll stick around for a little bit here if you do have any questions. Otherwise, definitely check out our virtual booth. We do have a giveaway going on too for a little bit here. Appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your week.